Welcome everyone to this episode of WCZ Specials powered by Fantasy Akada, wherein I have Isobel Joyce, former Irish international, with me discussing about Ireland's qualification for the next round of the ICC Women's ODI Championship, part-time contracts to full-time contracts. What exactly does this mean for Cricket Ireland and the women there? The role of Joyce, and a lot more on this segment. Welcome, Isobel, to the show. Ireland has qualified for the ICC Women's ODI Championship from the year 2022 to 25. That means they are now regularly going to play India's, Australia's, England's of the world. Which has never happened. We've seen how Pakistan's growth has been from the last two ICC Women's ODI Championship, and the same we can expect for the likes of Ireland and Bangladesh. We have Isobel Joyce with us, wherein we had our set of questions. A lot of fans put their set of questions. So we are asking all of that to Isobel. Isobel, the first thing to start off with is right from the domestic structure. Right now, we see one or two super series happening in a year. How do you feel that has to change so as we see more number of next-gen players and a bigger pool of players playing for Ireland?
Yeah, so there's currently two teams in that competition you're talking about. It's the Arcus Super 50. And that went down to two teams because of COVID, just reduced the number of overseas players coming in. And they just decided to make the two teams more competitive or a higher standard, I guess. So I think they're hoping to increase that to three teams this summer. Whether or not that's from overseas players coming in or from players coming through, I'm not sure, but obviously a more varied opposition is what they want. So hopefully that will happen. I mean, what you're not mentioning there is the structure underneath the senior team. So we have three main provinces that play cricket in Ireland. One of them is Leinster, who I work for as Women and Girls Development Officer. And then we've got the Northwest Cricket Union and the Northern Cricket Union. They're the two provinces, the two kind of unions in Northern Ireland. Because Ireland play cricket as a whole, we're not split into two like you might see for soccer or some other sports. So those three unions have been youth interprovincial teams, and we're really putting a huge amount of effort into those teams playing against each other and developing a kind of a structure beneath the Irish team, just to increase the level the girls are playing at, excuse me, and to get them playing longer form cricket as well. So that's something we're focusing on within the unions, separate to Cricket Ireland, to try and support girls coming through.
So we asked this thing to Harshal Patak as well, that movement from T20Is to ODIs now on a consistent basis. How difficult or easy is it going to be?
It's difficult if you don't get the game time. It's how I feel about it. Certainly when I was coming through, and I mean, it was later in my 20s, I played a lot of men's cricket. So it really depends on your club and whether they're supportive of their international women's players. It also depends on whether you've got time to do it, I guess. If you're playing every weekend, teams don't want to pick you if you can play maybe 2 or 3 games in a season. So I played probably 3 seasons in our men's second team, and played a few games with our men's firsts, and that really developed me as a batter, because they let me didn't let me bat in the top 3, but I did get to bat in the top 3, and just spend time at the crease. They can net as much as they want, but if you're not actually batting in the middle, which I think is the hardest part really, batting for long periods of time, if you're not doing that, it's very hard to then go and play against Australia and be expected to occupy the crease.
So now the aim is to play the next World Cup. You've qualified for the ICC Women's ODI Championship. Now the aim is to play the next World Cup. How does that go through? Changing from, say, potentially playing one series every 6 or 8 months to now playing on a regular basis every 3 months, and that too against higher ranked teams, Australia's, India's of the world?
It's going to be really, really hard. I think it's going to test this group. They've played more cricket, obviously, in the last 6 months. They went to Zimbabwe, then they went to those qualifiers that were ill-fated, and I think we saw the improvement through that Zimbabwe series. But yeah, it's going to be really tough for this group because of the age profile, and a couple of the players not being based in Ireland doesn't help either. Emer Richardson obviously has a full-time job in New Zealand and struggles to get away just for 1 or 2 tournaments in a year, let alone multiples. So I don't know how that's going to work. Mary Waldron's in Australia, but I think she would travel for 7 weeks to get to a tournament. That's the kind of her commitment to the Irish team. So I think she'll do whatever she can to be in the team. But we have a lot of students, and that's going to prove difficult. We were missing Ava Canning, who's been opening the bowling for Ireland really well in the home series this summer. She's got an exam year this year, finishing school, and she wasn't willing to miss any school for the Zimbabwe tour or the qualifiers, which is, I guess, fair enough. It's your final year, and also they've been out of school so much in the last few years, you don't want to miss an opportunity to be around your peers. But they're going to come up against a lot of things like that. Leah Paul's in college, Gabby Lewis is in college, and how much they're supported by their universities is going to be a huge factor in how they move forward. So that's just about availability, let alone having the depth of players that they need to be able to compete at that level.
I think so. You've opened three more questions for me. One, with so many players working different jobs, how much does that meaning of a full-time contract come into place here? Because till the time you do not have a full-time contract, you cannot actually expect the players to be playing and attending camps or doing something related to cricket for 12 months of the next 3 years. So that's one. Second, with players working at in different countries, in different jobs, how difficult is that going to be? Like, for example, we saw Richardson was not able to travel down to Zimbabwe for the same reason. And now developing that next gen of players, with most of the players now, as you mentioned, having their college work or attending schools, colleges, how difficult it is to create a pool of players, say 25, 30 players who are going to play for Ireland for the next 3 years?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions. I suppose the first one is the professionalism piece. I think they have to go professional. I don't see any way around it, because, as you said, they're going to be away so much of the time. I mean, even if you're not a student, if you're working, how you're supposed to hold some kind of job down to pay your rent is beyond me. I mean, that was difficult when I was playing, and we were nowhere near the number of games at that time. But so I effectively chose a job that has facilitated my cricket playing, but not everyone is going to do that. And in fact, the more players or women's sports moves towards professionalism, the less likely players are willing to accept that, which is as it should be. So I think they'll have to go professional. I don't know where the money will come from for that. I hope there's support from the ICC, because Cricket Ireland wouldn't have the funding for that. It'd be very expensive compared to maybe some other countries to make even just a core group full-time professional is extremely expensive. The team generally live in Dublin, which is extortionate prices for everything. So you can't live on minimum wage here. So I don't know how that's going to move forward, but I think that's probably forefront in Cricket Ireland's mind is how do we get the players available. I can't remember what the second part of the question was.
The second part of the question was with players, like, for example, Richardson missed out on a Zimbabwe tour. How is it going to pan out with players attending schools, colleges, or working at different places?
Yeah, so I think Emer has got she's probably one group under herself. She's very settled in New Zealand. I think she has ideas of coming back to Ireland at some point. So maybe this is the time that she just grins and bears it and comes home. I think it would be a very tough pill to swallow for her. She's really important to this team, and we saw that at the qualifiers. And every time she plays for Ireland, she does such a fantastic job. So I hope that she would come home, but I don't think there's a huge percentage chance of that. So maybe she picks and chooses a few series. Maybe that's the way they use her. Maybe she can't play all of them, and they just are thankful when they have her. That's the other thing. I know she's not on a Cricket Ireland contract in New Zealand, which is because she's obviously not able to train with the group, and that's a huge part of your contract. But maybe they'll give her a part-time one if they are doing contracts, and that would incentivize her to take part in tours. So that's her. The others, I don't know how it's going to go. Unfortunately, they might have to try and schedule around college exams. I know that they had a big study group in Zimbabwe. They're very good at, they have you have your team room when you're on tour, and they were apparently every day in there as a group studying for school and college exams, which is impressive, but shows kind of how professional they are, I guess. So I think there's players in there who cricket is how they see their life going forward, and they'll do whatever they can. And then the players that aren't like that, that's going to be the difficulty for Ed, I think, the coach, finding the right people and the personalities that are willing to sacrifice for cricket.
It's going to be that much difficult for Ed to find out that a pool of players who are going to sacrifice their studies, maybe even their jobs for that matter. But for that, Cricket Ireland will have to go fully professional, get at least 15-20 cricketers on a full-time contract, because that's the bare minimum need, so that they can stay, train, attend camps, and potentially then win games for Ireland. Isobel, one more question. How's the scene about camps and grassroots development in Ireland? And how it should be? What do you expect it to be, so that they can consistently get that next pool of players?
So camps aren't such a huge thing here, because nearly everyone in the squad is in quite a small area. We have a couple of girls that are in the senior squad that are from Northern Ireland. That's Amy Hunter and Cara Murray. They're in Northern Ireland, and that's still only 2 hours away. So most players are within half an hour, 40 minutes of the national training campus. So they can train, they do train every week, a number of times a week, the ones that are professional. So camps aren't as important, I guess. The difficulty is people in school and things like that aren't on any kind of contract. And the disparity between those players and the ones on part-time contracts for now. I don't think that there's too much ill will between the groups. There's no ill will at all. But they do things like they train it's still small pod training indoors here. So North County is where in Balbriggan is where one of the training centres is for indoor training, and they just come in groups of 4 and 5 and train with Ed and Glenn, and then the next group comes in. So camps aren't, apart from going to Spain and working in warm weather, which is something they might do ahead of tours. It's not as important, or maybe going somewhere where they can get access to grass wickets, because the facilities we have here are still not up and running. Unfortunately, they were supposed to be done, I think, 2 years ago, the training facilities, but there was some issues with that, so we're still waiting on that. Underneath, we have a funny club system, because the schools are on holidays for 3 months, or 4 months, depending on your age. So, and the cricket clubs here are open all day, every day. So when I was coming up, I could have played 3 games in a day. I might have played for the boys and then the girls and then the women's team. And a lot of the girls do that, actually. So the amount of cricket that they're playing, when you're if you're a really good female cricketer in a big club and you're 15, you can just play all day, every day. And then they can train with the boys, they can train with the girls, they can train with the women. Then they're down the nets at the weekend, while the men's team are playing and the women's team are playing. So they get a huge amount of cricket in really young. And it's actually when you start getting a bit older that maybe that drops off. So there are players there's really exciting cricketers about 13, 14, 15 who you can already see, wow, they'd be amazing in a couple of years. And it's just keeping them in cricket. And this ICC Championship is huge for that for us, because there's other sports they can go into where maybe there was a bigger carrot, like soccer is full-time professional. The Irish hockey team are doing incredibly well, and there's a lot of crossover between cricket and hockey. So if you were looking for a more professional setup, it was probably hockey before now, but they're not professional. So actually you might err towards cricket now if you're looking for it as a career. But yeah, there are lots of talented youngsters coming through, and it's just about then once they hit 17, 18, whether there's a system for them to go into and somewhere to go. And that's where we need the kind of the Arca Super 50 to be there. And probably for a senior interprovincial series, we only have youth interprovincials for now. So senior interprovincials will be good in the future.
I got it. So, what's the improvement that you've seen in the team in the last couple of years after you've retired?
It's been really good. The improvement, I think. I think Ed as a batting coach is obviously huge for the team. He's relentless and works really, really hard. And I think as a player, if you've got a coach who's willing to put the hours in, then you're going to work harder for them. So it's kind of a give and take. The girls really, I mean, they wouldn't tell me, I suppose, if they didn't like him, but I think they really, really like him and respect him, and that comes from his work ethic. He's just 24/7 the Irish women's team. That's his life and his sole focus. I think our whole family is actually more into women's cricket now than they were when me and Cecilia were playing, which hurts a little bit, but good to see them all invested in the women's team. So I think that's been the biggest improvement. And where else have they improved? I mean, Orla Prendergast has been, you probably haven't seen that much of her yet, but she is just a superstar. Yeah. And she's also a superstar footballer. So we were for years worrying that we were going to lose her to the Irish football team, but she chose cricket. So we're like, that's massive for us. And then the two leg spinners, we've got two leg spinners and a left arm spinner and a right arm spinner, and we never had such luxuries before. So that's been a big area of improvement.
And what's your message for Cricket Ireland and Ed Joyce now that Ireland is going to play all the top nations in the next 3 years?
Don't miss out on this opportunity, Cricket Ireland. Invest in the girls now, and they'll pay you back in the next 3 years cycle. And to the rest of the girls, just good luck, really enjoy it, and in those tough times, remember where you've come from. Even if I think there are going to be some tough fixtures, but it's all going to come together, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years. So best of luck with it.
Thanks, Isobel, for your time. It was lovely chatting with you on this show.
Thanks for having me on.